Hey, it's your Aaron, and I wanted to make a video to talk about politics again, focusing on the USA. The USA is a power that impacts the rest of the world and has a direct impact on people's lives here as well. So it is of an interest to me to talk about, and basically, the way things are going with the election is kind of frustrating. It's really gotten me angry. Specifically, the thing that's really getting me angry is the way the Democratic Party is acting, where they are doing stuff like removing the Green Party from ballot access in different places. And that's on top of them not actually offering people progressive policies and stuff. So I wanted to just go over that, my feelings about that and stuff. So if it comes to who would be better, who would be better to have in power, Trump or Biden? I think in the short term, it's better if Biden's in power. I think in the long term, if either one of them are in power, you are on your way towards a cliff. Um, and while I think maybe someone like Trump is sort of accelerating towards that cliff, someone like Biden is basically like cutting your brakes, because what happens is you normalize the answer being the thing that caused it, and that just repeats the loop. So basically, as I've been thinking about this, I've come to an analogy that I think is pretty helpful to understand, and that is that if you considered fascism to be like a tree, something that is alive and grows and stuff. Uh, if you had someone who was like openly fascist, for example, someone like Trump, who is like a racist and a bigot and all that stuff, and is openly against you know principles of democracy and stuff like that, that's like very visible, so that's kind of like the leaves and branches and things at the tree. Uh, and then there's another part of growth in a tree, and that is the root system. So trees operate in like a seasonal cycle. So in the summer months and whatever, or spring, whatever it is, they start to grow new growth in the tree, in the leaves, branches, things that are visible for you to see. And then in wintertime, what happens is the leaves and all that fall down, and the tree might look, from the outside as though it's dead, but there's still growth happening, the roots may be growing deeper, that kind of thing. And so what happens is, with neoliberalism, which is like the Biden type philosophy, it's not a different thing altogether. It's part of the same tree. It's still fascism. Neoliberalism is like crypto-fascism because it's fascist, but encrypted. It's trying to present itself as not being that. It's keeping its fascism secret. So that's like the roots of the tree that you can't actually see. And so what happens is, when you are limiting yourself to only those two options, the tree is basically got an eternal growth projection, because cats are lying stuff. Because you're just having cycles of an outward visible side of it, and then a hidden inward side of it. The roots growing deeper creates a stronger foundation, so that when the next time the tree has a growth cycle on the outside, summer or whatever, it can grow taller, it can grow more leaves and get bigger. And it needs both. So if the roots, were to like get cut off or whatever, the branches would get, would shrivel up and die. And if you got to summer and none of the leaves grew, then it wouldn't make any more energy, and the roots would also die as well. So I think that is the best way I can frame the problem that's happening in the USA, is that there is this two-party system where you have them basically tag teaming between root growth and branch growth. And they are basically creating a fake opposition between each other, getting the people to, pick sides. And, leaves are wrong, like, vote for roots to get rid of leaves, and then roots are wrong, vote for the leaves to get rid of the roots, not realizing that no matter who they vote for in that instance, they're voting for the same tree. So now people have been saying things like, you know, Trump wants to end democracy, and the election is between democracy and fascism. And, I'm sure Trump does want to end democracy, but I'm pretty sure Biden does as well. And, so it's really false framing. And so that kind of gaslighting can actually be really harmful to people, because what it does to suggest that, the roots and the leaves are disconnected and are somehow completely opposed to each other, it basically means that people are going to keep voting for that tree, like forever. It's eternal fascism, basically. So I'm sure the Republicans would love it to be a dictatorship, but the Democrats are actively trying to create a dictatorship. They are suing the Green Party to try and get them off ballots, which is the most undemocratic thing you can do, like to go through the legal system to dismantle the voter's choice, to take away an option from the voters. Something that I've been thinking about and saying recently is that any party that is against something like ranked choice voting is trying to scam you, not trying to represent you. Because the more options you have, the more freedom you have to choose different choices, the more the choice you make is likely to represent you. And so by limiting choices, you are reducing the number of options, and so the chance that what you get represents you is minimized. So what they are doing is minimizing choice, and what they're doing is actively dismantling and destroying democracy. And it's almost like the Democratic Party hates democracy more than the Libertarian Party hates liberty. And they are like in favor of a free market, which just means capitalists can do whatever they want. Even then, they still somehow seem to muster more love for liberty than the Democrats have for democracy. And so if it were a case of you have two choices and one of them is Trump and one of them is Biden, gosh, Rue, then obviously in that case you would say that the better one is Biden. But it's a false dichotomy. That's the problem, is that you're just voting for different parts of the same tree. And it really is a lack of imagination. Like I even saw someone, Miriam Williamson said she can't imagine anyone not voting out Donald Trump. And that is kind of indicative of the problem, is people generally don't even imagine acting outside of the electoral structure. For example, what you could do, and what has actually happened many times all over the world, you could have a popular uprising, you could have a general strike and an Occupy movement, and maintain it and keep it going until certain demands are met. Demands like, we want a new election, we want a new primary, or basically we want the Democratic and the Republican Party disbanded, or we want Bernie to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. Like, all of those things are achievable through things like a general strike or popular uprising, things that, involve people power and involve direct action. So the the framing of there only being these two choices, or the framing of there being these two predominant choices, is completely false because you have so many other options. They just aren't necessarily the election type choices you've always had. It is choices to go outside of elections and do actual organizing. So the framing that it's a choice between democracy and fascism is ironically accurate in another way, because democracy would be if you actually didn't legitimize this election. Democracy would be if the people themselves made their voice heard, instead of it being the capitalists and their goons and political parties doing their bidding. That is, Biden and Trump are both fascists. There's different parts of the same tree. Crypto-fascism and open fascism. And so voting for either of them is voting for fascism. And what vote can you make for democracy? It is entirely possible for the Green Party to win the election. If enough people voted, they're still on enough ballots to get enough to succeed. It's not that it can't happen. It totally can happen. There's nothing physically stopping people from going and doing it. The thing stopping people is all in basically their minds. It's an ideological commitment to, and fear, honestly, to not try. And so there's a few different things that could happen, but basically, if you wanted to vote for democracy in the election, your only option left is to vote for something like the Green Party. Especially now that, hey, I'm busy. Rue's chasing his tail. But especially now that the Democrats are actively going to court to dismantle democracy, they are kind of outing themselves as fascist. And so if you really wanted democracy, you are increasingly having your chance of doing that through elections being removed, and you're going to be forced to do it outside of elections. So right now, it is still physically and practically possible for the Green Party to win the election, but the way things are going and the way the Democratic Party, especially more so if they win our acting, that's going to be taken away from you. And you will, legitimately only have fascism on the ballot. Right now you have open fascism, closed fascism, market fascism, and social democracy, which is the Green Party. So only one of those options are not totally fascist, and that's the Green Party. And so right now, you still can vote for democracy, but, no matter who wins, the next election you probably won't be able to. But I would argue that waiting 4 years, waiting until, you literally don't have elections, or you literally only have two parties on the ballot forever, waiting until you get to that point is kind of making it harder to actually achieve democracy, to actually go outside of the elections and do a people power thing. That gets a whole lot harder. But also, it's that lack of imagination of what could be done now. Think of how many lives could be saved. Think of how many lives would be saved if you had the Green New Deal and Medicare for all, starting from next year. And that's entirely possible if someone like Bernie were to be in power, or if someone like the Green Party were to be in power. It is totally doable that it could happen next year. So oppose from that to however long it would take, at least 4 years, but perhaps 40 years before you get it in any other way. So basically, yeah, what I'm trying to say is that it would be really cool if the American people rejected both parties and actually got the Green Party to win the election and started to do things like set the example that they do. And through imperialism, if you don't follow their example, they take away your trade and your country gets poorer and stuff like that. So when I say set an example, I actually mean control and actually dictate. But you could begin to be setting an example of healing the ecology and healing the people. And you could be beginning to do that, and all it would take is to stop acting out of fear and actually make your voice be heard and do something and actually engage in democracy, direct democracy, not representative democracy. Because, as I was saying before, if a party is not in favor of ranked choice voting, they're not trying to represent you. Think about it, they're literally not. Because they want less options and they're basically using like the social capital and even physical capital that they already control to prevent you from having choices. That's abusive, it's manipulative, and it is a scam. And so, yeah, the cats are being really noisy and distracting me, but I need to get this off my chest. So I think it would be really cool if the American people would stop fear-based decision making, make their voice heard, and actually engage in democracy, to actually say the people are the ones who should be in power. That's literally disappearing. It is like standing on quicksand and you're busy sinking. It is like your foundations are eroding and your house is about to fall down. And it's not because of Trump that that's happening. It's because of both the Democrats and the Republicans being part of one fascist organism that sustains itself by pretending to have two sides, but in reality are connected and feed each other and sustain each other. Every single thing Trump is doing that you say is bad could have not been done if the Democrats had impeached him for any number of the hundreds of impeachable offenses that are far more provable, evident, and honestly, like, sort of harmful to the country than what they did actually try to impeach him on. There's no law saying you can only try and impeach someone once. And so they act like they're opposed to Trump, and yet they are happy to let him remain in control, remain making all of these so-called terrible decisions. They are terrible, but they are called terrible, but the Democratic Party is acting like they're okay with it, because otherwise why wouldn't they be doing that? I think probably they are worried about, how it would appear, but that's not leadership. Leadership is not, oh, well, what are they going to think if we actually stand up for ourselves? No, leadership is like when you say this is what needs to happen and you advocate for it and you try to make it happen. That is leadership. And that's not what they're doing. And so every single thing, like they voted for the transfer of wealth to the top. They voted for increase in military budget, and it is liberal judges kicking people off the ballot. So the Democrats are 100% okay with everything the Republicans and Trump are doing. They have, their job description is basically to act like they have a problem with it, because I think they kind of instinctually realized that if people identified them and the Republicans as both being part of the same organism, that instead of being able to pit people against each other, people would unite against them both. And that's what they are so scared of. That is why they don't want the Green Party to gain any traction at all. Because as soon as the Green Party starts to look like an alternative, it becomes an alternative not just to the Democrats, but to both of them, both parties that are basically requiring each other to sustain their existence and their power. And so what people need to do is to actually do what's right. And at this point, I honestly don't believe that voting for the Democrats would be the right thing to do, like morally or ethically or whatever. And not just because they are signing off on everything Trump's doing, but because they are gaslighting everyone, that they are literally calling themselves the Democrats, acting like they're pro-democracy, taking other parties off the ballot through the legal system, and those lies, it is like leading people into a trap. you know? So it's like, instead of, it's like, instead of being openly confrontational and aggressive towards someone, it's like acting kindly to them so that they'll follow you into the dark alley so that you can ambush them. And so, you know, it's just, it's unconscionable to go along with either of those options. And the only thing I think left to do is, like I was saying, to go outside of the election if you can't succeed in the election. Although you can actually succeed in the election, you can actually elect the Green Party. Now, obviously, I'm sort of also pragmatic and like to be realistic about things. And do I think that this will happen? And when I say it's possible, it is physically possible, and it's happened many times. The USA had the Occupy movement, so those people are mostly still alive. So you could conceivably think of it happening. But the attitude of the people right now is one of subservience. It's one of like Stockholm syndrome. It's one where, Obama, for example, created the deportation machine complex, industrial deportation complex, or whatever you want to call it, that is involved in genocide. And with Biden as his VP, Obama created that. Obama, like, dismantled or signed America out of the Magna Carta or whatever, so they can just basically detain anyone they want for as long as they want without any justification. That is not democracy. That is fascism. That is dismantling democracy. That was happening under Obama. And Obama is going around trying to sabotage the progressive movement, trying to make sure Bernie doesn't get elected, trying to make sure the NBA doesn't strike, trying to make sure the Green Party never catches any kind of popularity. He's acting as an agent of fascism. And basically, the problem with the Democrats winning is that people will then walk down the alley and make it impossible for anyone to come to their help, because they are put in a position where they're defenseless, basically. So, I personally, would say that I would like it if the Green Party won first, the Democrats won second, but I don't think it is okay to actually try and make the Democrats win, ethically speaking. I think you are feeding into the lie that the tree is not the same organism, that the roots and the leaves are disconnected. You're feeding into the lies and the fear-based decision-making that breeds loyalty to fascism. And the only way to break that is if people actually stand up and oppose it, stand against both, stand for something, not just be fear-based decision-making, but, it's like, why do you fight fascism? Not because you're guaranteed to win, but because it's fascism, And people really need to see the Democrats as fascists. And, it's like, sometimes you just need to fight it. Fight fascism in all its forms. Sometimes you can play your games and pit some fascists against others, yes. But when you realize that they are both intent on killing you, sometimes you need to oppose both of them. And so, yeah, I just think, who am I, not going to really have much influence on anything. It's probably just going to continue being whatever nightmare it currently looks like it is going to be. But I just felt like I wanted to share my thoughts, because it is a moment in time where there's a parallel timeline where people do actually stand up, where people do actually use their voice and actually enact democracy directly and saying, no, we're not going to take this. We're not going to accept either of these candidates. We're going to stand up, we're going to demand better. They are going to general strike, protest, whatever it takes until they get another option, or until those two options get taken away. There's a parallel timeline where that happens, and in that timeline, you get the Green New Deal, you get Medicare for all, we begin to heal the planet, we begin to set a precedent for universal healthcare all over the world. I don't have healthcare. If I get sick, I can't go to the doctor. I don't have the money for it. I don't have the money for insurance. If the USA enacted universal healthcare, we would a whole lot quicker, because it's currently scheduled for like 7 years' time, but there's a neoliberal party here trying to make it go even further away or stop altogether. So the chance of actually achieving that before the USA does is, in my opinion, like zero. So even me could get healthcare if the American people did that in that timeline. And I want to live on that timeline. I don't want to live on this timeline where the American people are so subservient, so internalizing their own domination that they just allow themselves to be led to the slaughter. Um, and yeah, I guess I have got that off my chest now. So thanks for watching. Bye.